Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird Grimoire. Welcome back to our teaching series, Wicca 303. Today we are talking about activating the elements. Now, before I explain to you exactly what I mean by activating the elements, let's go over what we've learned in the beginning already. So this should be very old news to you if you've been following along through the whole teaching series, Wicca 101, Wicca 102, and now Wicca 303. So first, we learn what the elements are. Then we learn about their magical function and general correspondences and deity and mythical being associations. Then we have meditations on the elements themselves to better learn how to sense them. And we, of course, we study various forms of magic that make particular use of each element where it's more dominant and visible. And then, of course, prayers and other invocations regarding the elements themselves. Now, the next step of that, and this is where we are actually activating the elements, is by acknowledging that these elements are already a part of us. We are able to reach out to them from other sources because they are also within us. And when we become more consciously aware of their presence in ourselves, that improves our connection to those external sources. And it also eases the way to learning and understanding the various phases and moods of the elements and how to make better use of them. This is all about improving our capabilities and developing our talents as practitioners. So we will begin with Earth, appropriately enough. Now you'll see I have listed various forms and manifestations of Earth, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we have these things within us as well. So begin, Earth, a mountain, this big block of rock, the strength and the resilience of stone. There are going to be aspects of our character that are very like that kind of mountain. It's going to be firm. It's going to stand tall and proud. It's going to exist no matter what is being thrown at it at any time. Another aspect of Earth that we have within ourselves is like the field, very fertile ground upon which things might grow. This is the ground where essentially all the things that we learn and all the things we take in, this is where it gets planted. And if we have anything coming from that, it's because we have cultivated that field. We have taken care of it. We have seen that it has gotten its nutrients, or in other words, we have ensured that we have the conditions necessary for us to properly learn things. That is the internal field. And then the grave. Graves, of course, are places of burial and decomposition. This is where we put old patterns of ourselves, where we put bad behaviors that we're trying to set aside or at least minimize to the degree possible, old ideas that have been proven incorrect or that didn't have a very particularly healthy perspective on it. This is where we put things that have died within us. They are buried, they are broken down, and we are able to then use those energies to help something else grow in time. Then there's sand, a barren expanse, shifting with the wind, very very prone to extremes of temperature as well as influence from what the wind is doing, creating sandstorms and all the problems that go along with that. We even have that within ourselves, things where there's just no possibility of something sinking in, no possibility of something being nurtured, something that is going to defy any attempt to create growth out of it. We do have these areas within ourselves, and it's important that we realize this energy is present within us. And then clay. Clay is all very good if you're wanting to shape something or insulate something, but it also blocks water. This is why, when we have a garden, if we have a lot of clay in the soil, the plant may not necessarily do very well there if we don't have appropriate drainage. We can drown things if they're planted in clay. There are things that we can drown in ourselves if we put it in the clay, earthy aspect of our own character. It's not going to get the exchange of energies that it really needs. But it is very good if we're trying to shape something. So knowing when we need to call forth this energy from within ourselves, that can be particularly helpful in our spell work. And then earthquakes, those sudden shakes creating irrevocable tears in the landscape, very disruptive, frightening, chaotic. We have probably suffered many earthquakes of the soul in our time, particularly if you had a different worldview at one time, or you had a different religious persuasion, and then suddenly you are finding yourself here listening to videos about Wicca and paganism and figuring out how you're going to practice that in your life. That is an earthquake of the soul that requires such a radical shifting that things can never be as they once were. It shakes you up, it's going to challenge you, it's going to make it difficult. To carry on, and you're not going to be able to carry on in exactly the same way that you did before. And of course, I bring all of this up because we have to recognize these energies within ourselves so we can use them deliberately as the situation requires. When we are calling forth the earth element in our circle, we are also calling forth the earth element within ourselves. And depending what condition, what dominant landscape our own inner earth has, that's going to have an impact on the formation of the circle, of how we are going to actually be manifesting in things. This is why it's so important to continue meditating and continue looking within, because this is the means by which we bring forth intentions. This is the figurative soil of fertility from which our intentions can grow. It needs to be in the proper condition for us to grow the proper things. It needs to function properly. Now, the element of air. Air can be that soft and gentle breeze, very persuasive. It's not making any particular demands. It's just kind of washing over you. That's what the air is like where I'm living right now, on the day of the recording. That is what the air is like. It is soft. It's not doing anything destructive at all. It's just letting things go in. We can present our ideas in a very similar way. Our ideas and our words can be that soft and gentle breeze. And if we are needing to persuade someone, or perhaps get them to consider looking at things from a different perspective, we will have far greater success with that soft and gentle breeze. And even when we are trying to change ourselves or correct ourselves or encourage ourselves to continue doing something, we will get so much further with that soft and gentle breeze dominating the air within our being. But air can also be those harsh winter winds cutting through straight to the marrow. That's not always well, actually, it's very seldom a pleasant process to have to feel that energy, let alone make use of it, because it's not going to be fun for anyone. But it is going to be the kind of thing that can go straight to the truth. This is one of the reasons why, by and large, the suit of air energy is associated with the suit of swords in the tarot, because it can be like a sword. It can just cut straight through to the marrow, to the heart, to the very inner being, and it will be unyielding. It will be there. It will leave a wound. Now, sometimes those wounds can be recovered from, sometimes they can't. Another thing to bear in mind. And then a very gusty and energetic, almost, when you have, for me where I live, it's usually kind of the late summer. You have these big gusty bursts of wind, and it's almost like the earth is breathing. You can almost feel the air contracting and expanding and going back and forth. It's wonderful. It's my it's my next favorite thing to a storm. And having that within ourselves, it's almost as if we're in this hyper reality. Our senses are perked because we're getting so oxygenated in the literal sense. But this can also essentially, in a more spiritual sense, oxygenate our energy. So it's more active, it's more aware, it's more receptive, it's responding to its environment a lot more naturally. It's very useful to cultivate this again for our rituals, for our spells, for our pathworking meditations when we're trying to interact with the animal guides, ancestors, or divinities. Then, of course, air, tornadoes. Those conflicting winds swirling and battering each other and anything in their path. Tornadoes are very common where I live at this time of year, and we can have tornadoes within ourselves. So this is when we are in a state of war of ideas about ourselves, when our ideas have been challenged, when we adopted an idea that actually does make a lot of sense, but it completely contradicts and makes rubbish of another idea that we had. And part of us does not want to give up that old idea, and they're battling and they're whirling and they're swirling, and it can just leave a person feeling absolutely devastated within themselves. That's a very powerful thing. And of course, externally, we are in a tornado of ideas right now. Everyone is battling. You see it on social media, you see it in any kind of public discussion, you see it in every facet of life. People are trying to really define who they are, what they're all about, and those ideas are coming to conflict with other people's philosophies. And it is in a very destructive stage right now. Recognizing that is important. Then hurricanes, that fury of air and water combined with overwhelming defenses, just washing everything away, blowing everything away, acting as this one unit to completely change the landscape. And there's nothing you can do but really get out of the way of that, or, accept that you're about to get hit and battered down. It's a, it's another one of those devastations of the soul, almost as bad as an earthquake sometime, only you also have that overwhelming emotion to go along with it. And then there's when we have that seeming absence of air. It's still present, but it's stagnating. It's like being in a state of paralysis. I think for many years, a lot of us have been in that state of paralysis. That element of air has not been active within us. We have not been making use of it. And now we are in a stage where we've gone to the opposite extreme. And so these moods of air, however they manifest, they are easier to recognize and wield just because we are constantly breathing. We can easily adjust. We can experience a lot of these things, at least on the personal micro level, to varying degrees at will. And so by doing various forms of breathing exercises, just paying attention to that in general, we can become more in tune with our own personal air. And that, of course, makes us more in tune with the air outside of us. Now, fire. Fire can be the flame on the stove, controlled and manageable to where we can cook. And that's where how a lot of our intentions are as well. When we set some form of magic into motion, it can be like a process of cooking. And we've got it at just the right heat, at just the right amount of enthusiasm and drive in order to get that job done. Fire can also come to us in the form of that roaring fireplace on a chilly evening, providing us with light and comfort. It draws us in, it draws companionship in, having that kind of warmth. We sometimes hear people being described as a warm person. And now, not all of us can be that to everyone, but most of us can be that way for at least someone. We can be that place of comfort when their own souls have grown cold. And of course, we can cultivate this within ourselves when we are feeling discouraged, or we're not sure what we can do, or the elements just seem to be going all against us. We can stoke that inner roaring fireplace within ourselves, and we can provide our comfort and be reminded that this is a moment in time. And the distractions and the obstacles in our path, they are also a moment in time. They will not last forever. This is not a death sentence that we are dealing with. It's just something to endure. In the meantime, we take care of ourselves. And of course, the sun itself, it's a great big ball of fire in the sky. Well, in the universe, solar system, really, but still. For our purposes, you know what I mean. It is some symbol of the god, of solar deities everywhere. It's necessary for all life to exist. It is a source of light and life itself. And then we have the campfire outdoors. There's something about campfires that are very companionable, yet there is a sense of needing to be on your guard a little bit more, because you don't want it to get out of control. It has to be kept under strict watch, because of course wildfires are a possibility, and we can have a wildfire of the soul just as easily as we can have a wildfire in a dry forest, that out of control blazing over the ground, and it just goes and goes and goes until it runs out of fuel or meets with enough water to make it stop. But a lot of times it is that lack of fuel that actually makes the fire stop. And yet, even in those most disastrous times, even within ourselves, when we just feel that we have driven ourselves to the brink of madness, we've expended all of our energy, we have burned brightly, and we didn't feel like we got enough of it, or we were in this very destructive, perhaps a very self-destructive mode of being. But even once that has run its course, what follows is a resurgence of life, like the phoenix coming up out of those ashes, learning from mistakes, whether it's our own or other people's. Your own fire can be creative or destructive. And as you wield that more precisely within yourself, you're going to be treating it more appropriately, both in the physical manifestation of fire and in the spiritual manifestations of fire in your work. Water, of course. We have oceans, these large bodies with great tides. It is another aspect of the tomb in the womb, just as the element of earth is. Life is said to have begun in the ocean, at least on the cellular level. And of course, the ocean has been the tomb for many a person and many a creature. It is the beginning and the end of all. Then, of course, another manifestation of water is the rain. Rain can be very life giving. It can be a mist or it can be a monsoon. It can certainly be dangerous in excess, but rain always ultimately feeds the plants that grow into the earth and that allows for life to continue on. We have lakes and ponds, these self contained watery spaces. They can be quite energetic. Some of the waves that you can see along the Great Lakes are certainly a sight to behold. Sometimes well, really, the only thing greater than them that I have personally observed is the ocean waves coming in. But I mean, they can be pretty energetic. And then you have a pond, which can be very still indeed, but still it's there, it's self-contained. I suppose within ourselves, it's, are we active in our water, are we emotionally engaged, are we using that as a means of going with the flow where it's appropriate for us to do so, or are we cut off? Is this something that we've been trying not to use, and then as a result, we start getting that thin layer of pond scum? It's nasty to think about having pond scum of the soul or pond scum of the emotional landscape, but it happens to people all of the time. And as practitioners of the craft, that's not a good situation to be in. We need to at least be able to identify it so we can learn how to remedy it. And then water can come to us in the form of rivers and streams, always in motion. That watery energy, that's something that people draw upon, particularly in their family life, or when they are wrestling with laying certain traumas of themselves to rest. Having that cleansing of the spirit of saying, yes, this terrible thing happened, and now I am sending the energy of that out of me. I am moving it away. It is going back. It is no longer going to be dominating my landscape. Using that motion can be very useful to us. And then storms, the water unified with the wind to very energetic effect. I do love a good storm. They can be destructive, sure. They can be very dangerous, but there's something invigorating about them as well. Everything is happening, it's active, and we can be in a storm, and it doesn't even always have to be a bad storm. It's not necessarily something within us that is causing destructive. It can be this storm that sends us into an enthusiasm of ideas that we are having emotional reactions to, and it's just changing, and it's changing the landscape of everything. What was once barren within us is now becoming fertile ground because it's been nurtured with that watery energy. And then, most destructively, tidal waves, tsunamis, provoked by earthquakes, including earthquakes of the soul, and that then affect the water of the ocean, unleashing a terrible force that will utterly just destroy and annihilate anything in its path. That can happen us on the emotional level, that can happen to us on the magical level. So we do need to be aware of that possibility and wield it with care. And even the most rational individuals who have considerable self-control, they must learn to master the water within. If anything, someone who's inclined to be less emotional, they have even greater need to master this, because when you aren't really used to dealing with much of an active emotional landscape, by the time you do experience a very powerful emotion, it is much more likely to have unintended effects on the people around you, just because you're not accustomed to dealing with it. So this is something that a necessary lesson for everyone to deal with, no matter what form of this watery energy we are talking about. And then spirit, the element of spirit, and specifically your spirit. Knowing your spirit enables you to better differentiate between your personal energy and that of other beings. We have touched on this many times, often in the context of detecting other people's energy for empaths, and knowing how to separate the two so you don't get overwhelmed with other people's junk. And really, your spirit, it is your core at its most potent, its most refined, the baseline of your soul, something that is that solid, that thing that will not change about you. It is your innermost nature. And that is the part of you that will most easily and naturally connect to other magical energies and to divinities. So definitely know yourself. And that is what I mean by talking about the activation of the elements. This is the activation of the elements within. And the more you work with that, the greater your progress will be with your magical workings. So, homework for March 22nd through March 28th. Number one, identify the dominant manner in which each element is present within you. Number two, try different modes of being of each element and record the results. And number three, make an effort to decide what form of elemental energy you wish to wield as various situations arise. Really think about this. This way, you can be more strategic in your actions and in how you wield your own energy as well as external sources of energy. Lots of stuff going on there. So that's what I have for you this week. Next week, it'll be a much shorter class. It'll just be a seasonal witch keeping for the month ahead. Definitely come back for that. In the meantime, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, leave them for me in the comment section below or email me at brigantiablackbird@protonmail.com if there's something you'd like to discuss more privately. But that will do it for today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.